Welcome everyone. I'm Mark with the Schrock Show. Today we have Jeff Kropf with us, former state representative, and you have a radio show right now, right?
I do, yes, on 1220 AM KSLM out of Salem, Oregon, the state capital.
All right. And is that, what is that show about?
It's Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. It's a 1 hour. It's call-in political talk radio, so we have callers that call in and they respond to things that we're talking about.
All right. So I guess we'll start with the first question is how'd you get into politics? Or I know you're in the state. What years were you in the state representative?
I got elected to the House of Representatives in Oregon in 1998, my first legislative session. Back then, legislative sessions were every other year. Now we have them every year right now. In fact, there's a short session going on right now.
Yeah. Just click
Okay.
on there.
And so my first session was 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And so my last session was 2005 at the end of it, although my term carried through until January of 2007. So I've served 8 years in the House of Representatives.
Yeah. So how'd you get started in politics?
Well, there's an old saying about this is that, once politics gets into your blood, the only thing that gets it out is formaldehyde. Okay? And it's really true. So I kind of got started when I was about 16, actually, because my older brother had gotten involved with, then our state representative was Representative Liz Van Leeuwen, farmers just down the road from us. And that's kind of was my exposure to politics. And so I went to the Capitol and sat with her, watched committee hearings and the floor sessions, and actually sat in with meetings that she had with government officials, the Secretary of State and others. And so it gave me a really good sense of how that process of the legislature works. The legislature is mandated by Oregon's Constitution to meet every year, but it's really only mandated to do one thing, and that's produce a budget.
Oh, okay.
And they do that, but they do a lot of other things, and it's not always good, okay, what they do. So it got into my psyche, and I was always involved politically at some point, okay? And then I'd moved away and had lived in California and Arizona, and had the opportunity to come home and start farming is when I met you, and you were young, right?
Yep.
And got re-involved in politics back in Oregon with the local Republican Party here in Lynn County. And then the opportunity came for me to run for office based on term limits was in place at that time, and so our Representative Liz Van Leeuwen couldn't run for office again. So I ran in the Republican primary, had an opponent. I worked really hard because no one knew who I was, okay? Because it was Lebanon's sweet home. It was areas that were outside of my world. My world was, Halsey and Harrisburg, right? So I knocked on every door I could possibly find, and I went to virtually every meeting we could find, neighborhood watch meetings, school board, city council meetings, just to introduce yourself and to get to know people. That, you're going to need their vote or their support, or you want their support, okay? So I worked really hard. I won the primary, and then I outworked my Democrat opponent, beat him by 18 percentage points in a legislative district that had 3% more Republicans than Democrats. So it was really pretty even. It was a heavily targeted race by the Democrats, and we just outworked them and had a better message. Got elected, and then the real work began. And the real work is serving other people. And you take an oath of office, and you better take it seriously, whether it's at the city council or the school board, certainly in the legislature. And your oath is to serve everyone in your legislative districts, not just the people who gave you money and not just the people who voted for you. And I took that seriously. My door was always open to the teachers union, which is my absolute adamant political enemy, okay? They didn't like anything I did. I don't think I maybe voted for one of their bills one time in my 8 years. And that was the most satisfying thing, was helping people that I served with their issues with government and just listening to them. Because most people, they want to know, first off, that you care enough to listen to them and what they think. That's our constitutional republic. This is how we engage in democracy is through our elected representatives. But if you're going to be an elected representative, and again, I don't care whether it's at the school board level or it's city council, county commission, legislature, Congress, you better listen to people because that's what they care about the most. You may not always agree with them. My door was always open to the teachers union. And they came and lobbied me many times, and I had contacts with them and discussions. I never shut them out of my world, out of my legislative opportunity to talk with me. Or their teachers, the teachers that belonged to their union, that believed differently than I did about public education. Those constituents were my constituents. So when they came to talk to me at the Capitol building, I listened. And sometimes I just had to respectfully disagree with them. And I'll tell you, that's the hardest thing, Marcus, about being an elected official is saying no. Saying no to people who come to you with their issues. If it's just very much against your values and your principles, then you have to say no. And you can do that in a graceful and a nice and a respectful way. What's sad about where we are today is we're so polarized. And not that we weren't back then, but it was different.
Yeah.
Back then you could literally sit down and talk with your liberal Democrat colleagues in the House and the Senate. You wouldn't agree, but you could have a civil conversation. Today they won't even talk to you. That's what the representatives and the senators tell me today that are my friends that are still in the process. And that's too bad because that's how it ought not to be.
Yeah. So being a state representative, that's the whole state of Oregon.
No.
Or is that just your
just
district?
my legislative district,
just
which about 65,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's who you serve.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
But in essence, you do serve the entire state.
You do. Yeah.
Because a lot of your votes are bills that impact the entire state.
Yeah.
Okay. So you serve. You really care more about the people in your legislative district.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, your oath is not just to serve is not just your legislative district; it's the entire state.
So is that a full-time job, or how does that work? Or you're always on the job, whether you're there or not?
Yeah, it's just like being a pastor. It's like being a cop, a firefighter. You're always on the job as an elected official. And the reason I say that is, and this just really. Over the period of years, it got really old to my wife because no matter where you went, people wanted to talk to you about your job because maybe they never get a chance to see you and talk with you. And at a fundraiser or just out at the grocery store or the gas station, people recognize you and they want to talk to you, and it's your job to listen. And so you listen, and it ends up being a full-time job because you need to go, especially in rural districts like what we have here, where it's Lebanon, it's Sweet Home, it's Staten, it's Scioto, it's Harrisburg. Those are all part of the legislative district. So Harrisburg's close to my home, but you got to go to all those meetings in Sweet Home and up to Scioto, and you cross the river into Staten and clear up around Silverton and Sublimity. And you're gone a lot. And you have to, this is the biggest thing that I counsel people who are thinking about running for office. The local level's maybe not quite so bad, but where you have to do a lot of traveling, the most important thing is that your family understands what this means. It means less time with the family because now you take this job seriously. So for rural legislators, it's a greater commitment because of the travel time and that type of thing than it is for a legislator who lives in Salem and doesn't have to go very far, or Portland, where you live in really small districts where there's a lot of people. Those are small legislative districts in terms of geographic size. So you can go a block over here and then a block over there and have meetings where I have to drive 30, 45 minutes to an hour to get to my meetings. It ends up being a full-time job. It's not meant to be, and it shouldn't be. The more that the legislature's in session, the less your wallet and your freedom is safe.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's really true. Our liberty to live as we want as people of faith or not as people of faith, our liberty is threatened every time the legislature meets, because especially with the people that are in control right now, their view of liberty is very different than ours. Their view is that government has the answers and should control the majority of the aspects of our life. Our view of liberty is that God created each of us with an individual spirit, even though it is meant to be serving Him and serving other people. And that we have that innate desire within us to be free as individuals, not as slaves, but as a free people. And this nation was founded on those God-given rights. And it's written in our Declaration of Independence. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those unalienable rights that are given to us by God Almighty. They're not given to us by government. Our right to think and say what we want is being threatened today in Oregon by many of the bills that are or policies that are brought forward by the people in control of government today. And it's getting to the point where soon your pastor, my pastor, me as a radio talk show host, or you as a podcaster, if you say the wrong things, government will come after you because you're not saying what the government says you should say. And that's an absolute opposite of what our founders intended. That's why we have the First Amendment. But beyond that, again, that's an inalienable right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, I think you see that already in
you
some,
do?
Yeah, in
Sadly.
The people that are, whether it's podcasts or just talk shows, or you see that government going after them already. But do you think when you were in government or in politics, social media wasn't a big thing, right?
No, it really didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
Yeah, Facebook was just getting started. When I left the legislature in 2007, and I didn't know what to think of it then. And you look at it today, and it's predominant. In fact, all of these apps we have on our smartphones are tracking us. Okay, they're listening to us. Like right now, there's probably multiple apps hearing every word that I'm saying. Soon there'll be ads that'll show up on my phone that relating to maybe this Honda, maybe to Liberty, whatever.
Yeah, and we see that.
Yeah.
So do you think what part do you think that plays in politics?
Social media,
versus then versus now.
It's really changed the dynamics. It's made politics meaner.
Yeah.
And it's one of the because and here's why. Is because I can say mean things about Marcus on my X or my Facebook and never have to look you in the eye. I can just say mean things about you, right? But I'm looking you in the eye now. It's a little harder for me to say mean things about you now. And because it creates this wall where you don't have to have personal interaction that restrains us as human beings with a conscience and with a heart. And so that's been what's detrimental about it. And I think it's the genie's out of the bottle, or as we say in the farm, the horse is out of the barn. So you can shut the door all you want now. But it's too late.
So do you think that's what's going on with politics? Like you were saying, they don't talk to each other?
That's exactly
because
what
they can just go on social media and say whatever they want. They don't have to talk to each other.
So when I was in the legislature, they wouldn't let us have a laptop on the floor. So you go to floor session when the legislature's in session, usually from 10 till 12. Okay, so you have committee meetings in the morning. And you have a caucus meeting where your group meets and you talk about what you're going to do on the floor. You go to floor session, and today they have their laptops there and they have their cell phones there, and they can be very distracted by things. Back then, we didn't have any of that. So if someone stood up and gave a speech for or against a bill, you tended to listen to it. Today, it just gets tuned out entirely, right? And that's unfortunate because debate in the committee hearings process and on the floor when you're actually voting on bills, debate is important for a number of reasons. It's our system of governance for us to, Ronald Reagan said it best, liberty or freedom is not passed through us in our genetics to our kids. It has to be taught. It has to be fought for. It has to be debated in the public square. And debate's nothing new. I mean, it's innate in human nature. It's how God created us. Heaven forbid you debate with your wife, because that's a debate you should always lose. Because if you painful experience, okay, those are arguments you don't want to win. Okay?
Yeah.
So debate is innate to our human experience, and we want to be so careful with how we debate and the things we say, but yet not shy away from standing up for our principles and our values. I remember, this is a great story. I remember once the 9/11 attacks had occurred. We had to go into 5 special sessions to cut budgets because we were in a big recession in the country. Yeah. And one of my Democrat colleagues, a fellow firefighter like me, and just a union liberal, we were completely opposite, but we were friends. Okay. And he stands up and he's giving this speech about how mean we are and cutting all of these budgets and we should just be raising taxes on the rich and so forth. And none of us were listening to him until he compared us, the party in control, with the 9/11 terrorists. Now, I'm sitting over on the side aisle. I'm not sitting at my desk. I'm sitting having a conversation with my staff on the side aisle. And I heard that and I turned around and I looked at him. Because he and I were firefighters.
Oh, okay.
We saw firefighters dying when those towers fell on 9/11. And rage erupted out of me.
Yeah.
And I got up and I started yelling at him and I went across the bar and I was going to go deck him. I was going to hit him and knock him down. Yeah. And people were restraining me and people were restraining him and the speaker's banging the gavel, order, order, order. Yeah. And so we had to take a recess and we took about half hour and came back in and he came and he apologized.
That's a pretty big, bold statement there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. That's rare. That's not normally how we do business on the floor. And you know, that relation, I still have a relationship with him today. It's not a bad relationship. But I'll never forget those moments like that. That was more than debate. That's not what debate should have been. It shouldn't be where you engage in the politics of what we call personal destruction. You're trying to assassinate the character of somebody else. You know, the Bible says, the word says, by their fruits you will know them. So if the stuff they're bringing forward are coming out of their mouth, you know, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? So when people are saying and doing those things in the political world, you know where they're at spiritually. And it's, most of the time it's not a good place. Okay? Even people on my side have wrong motivations for serving in politics. And this gets back to your first question is, you know, how did I get involved? The why I got involved is more important. And motivation is everything in public service. And again, I don't care whether it's at the school board or the city council or the legislature. Why are you willing to serve? It's your why that matters. If you want to make it a career and move up the political ladder like I did, those are the wrong motivations. Now, originally, I decided, I was in my mid-30s, and I decided, I've been pretty blessed, it's time for me to give something back. That's why I joined the fire service and started here at Halsey Fire. It's been 30 years in the fire service. Because I needed to give something back. And I felt like, okay, I should give something back here. But you know, I'd been in the music business. I'd been a professional musical performer. And so I could speak in front of people, and I wasn't afraid to be in front of people. And even though my original motivations were right, when you get elected to the legislature or a mayor or whatever, now you're somebody important. And it starts to go to your head. And you begin to lose sight of your original good intentions and motivations for wanting to serve people. And that was there was a turning point for me. And I always told my wife, I said to Peggy Sue, I said, you know, if I ever start sounding like the people I yell at on the TV, then you need to tell me it's time to get out. And about halfway through my 8 years, she said, you're starting to sound like those people. And I had to make a decision. Was I going to be one of those people? Was I going to compromise my values and principles so I could get to the next higher level of public office and go to Congress and you know, whatever else? Or was I going to stand firm for what I really believed was right and go back to my original intentions? And I chose the latter. I chose to go back. And that's one of the reasons I got out and I did it willingly. I could have kept running as long as I wanted. But willingly, I said, no, I've had enough. and I got into talk radio, and then I started working as a lobbyist. I couldn't be a lobbyist. I just can't do that. Because I'm too much of an ideologue, because I believe in my values and principles. And that's when I got involved in grassroots politics and traveled the state, teaching people how to fight City Hall and win at the local level, and I still do that today.
So I want to get into the grassroots thing, but back up. I didn't know you're a music artist. What was that?
Well, I was, we Mennonites. We know how to sing a cappella, right? You learn how to sing at a very young age and how to carry a tune. And so my mom got me up in front of the church, when I was a little kid, and sang specials and that kind of thing. And then, later on, I got into high school and started listening to rock and roll music, which I don't recommend, or rap music or anything else. And I wanted to be a rock and roll star, and so I played in bands in high school and then in college, and later on had a solo nightclub act. And the funny thing about all of that is the Lord was saying, I remember vividly once singing at the Coburg Inn when it was a restaurant and a nightclub. And I was doing a series of nights there and gig there for a few months. And I'm playing guitar and singing love songs around a piano bar. And there's this couple fighting in front of me, literally across the table, just fighting, having a Donnybrook. And I'm trying to sing a love song. And I just vividly heard the Lord say to me, he said, "What are you doing here? This isn't where you're supposed to be." And at that point, I said, "Okay, I'm gonna back out of that." And I had long hair, and I cut my hair, and slowly began that journey back to doing where my real love, my first love, was singing worship songs, praise, whether they're out of the hymnal, the wonderful great hymns, or our modern day praise and worship, which is all I listen to now. I don't listen to any of my old rock and roll. And I wrote songs and recorded demo tapes and sent them out to get a record deal. And I did all this stuff because I wanted to be a star.
Yeah. Well, you were into fitness too, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I first met you.
Yep.
And you had a friend that was he was bigger than you.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of his name.
I lift weights, and even to this day, at my age, I'm 65 now, just turned 65, and I still run and work out, and it's a good thing for your lifestyle to take care of yourself physically as much as you can.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so I got out of the music business, and I did praise and worship for a while years ago when I went to Christ Center and so forth, and I pick up the guitar in the mornings and play and sing a little bit and worship to the Lord now, because that's where my heart is.
Yeah. All right, so good. Yeah, I don't think I ever knew that, but anyways, that's good. So back to the grassroots thing now. So what's that about?
It's about freedom.
It's about freedom. But is that something? Is it an organization, or is that just a saying for something
it can be both? It can be both. Yeah, it can be both. I have an organization called Oregon Capitol Watch Foundation. And our role has been in times past, not so much right now, but in times past, is to look at how government spends our money, mostly the state capital, and how our tax dollars are spent at the state level, and find the waste and the ridiculous expenses, and really exploit that and put that out there. But I do work with other grassroots groups to train people, even to this day, at the local level, how to be effective at grassroots. In fact, just last night, I was at the River Church in Salem, which is pastored by my good friend Lou and Lori Wutan. And they have a kind of a political group called the Freedom Business Fellowship, and it's where Christian businesses come together to support each other. This all came out of the lockdowns when the 2020 Kate Brown shut down businesses, and shut down churches, although the marijuana shops were open and the liquor stores were open, all that. And so it came out of the need to come together as Christians and say no to that and to support each other. Okay, so they are still involved very politically. And so last night I went there and shared with them about how you testify effectively to the legislature or to your school board or to your city council. And that was that testimony, and it's a curriculum that's on the web on my friend Rich, who worked with me in the grassroots. His organization is called Western Liberty Network. You can go to westernlibertynetwork.org, and you can click on his training tab, and you'll see a long list of training modules, which you can print off and read, about how to do all kinds of things, how to help someone run for office, how to run a local campaign on a shoestring, how to organize, how to lobby your legislators. So last night I gave them a training on effective public testimony, which could be written testimony, or it could be speaking it face-to-face, or maybe it's just, we teach people how to ambush your legislator or your person who doesn't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So in the legislature, if you want to talk to your legislator and they don't want to talk to you for whatever reasons, they don't give you a meeting, that kind of a deal. We teach people how you wait for them outside of the hearing room, and when they're walking, they exit and they're walking back to their office or to the floor to go vote. You can walk up to them and introduce yourself. I'm one of your constituents and I want to talk to you about this, this, and this. Okay, and they're not going to say no to you because there's all these other people around, right? So we teach little techniques about that. We teach how in public testimony, you want to be succinct and right to the in 2 minutes, because it's about all the time your city council or your school board will give you, and the legislature is the same. So we teach you how to do 4 things, and this is what I did last night to this group of Christian business.
So is this kind of like coaching?
It is. Yeah, it's very much like that. Yeah. In fact, the exercise is that we teach you these 4 elements, and then you literally write it out, do it yourself, and then you practice it amongst yourselves, and then we talk about it afterwards. So that's how we train. So Rich just had a big training conference last Saturday up in Portland. I opened it up in prayer, and then I was one of the trainers there. We had some national people fly in from Washington, D.C. and other places to be speakers there. So this is all part of how we teach people at the local level that their political involvement is not in vain. Even though we're supposedly in a blue state, it isn't that blue. And let me give you a good example of this. We Republicans, conservatives, would be in control of the House of Representatives today in Oregon if 4,270 votes had changed in swing districts. Now, that's not very many votes when you think that, in the legislature, you're going to get, 2 million votes, right? Just 4,270 votes had changed, not voting for the Democrat, but voting for the Republican. Then the Republicans would be in control of all of the committees and would hold the speakerships. Why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why it's important. Because right now, there's a bill that's going to be heard Monday that takes away our parental rights to go to a school board meeting and urge our school board to not allow pornographic books in our school library or be taught to our kids in curriculum under the guise of equity or transgender. Okay? Because this bill takes away the school district's, the school board's authority to approve the curriculum. Okay?
Yeah.
That's current law today. This bill strips those boards of that power. That bill is going to be heard for its first hearing Monday in the legislature. If Republicans were in control, that bill would never get a hearing. Even though Democrats would have, a leftist Marxist Democrat would have still, man, that's who they are.
Yeah.
They're the philosophy of the people that run the state government today, of the House and Senate, is not based on the principles of liberty of our God-given rights. It is right out of the pit of hell. It's right out of Marxism, because that's what Marxism is. It's out of the pit of hell. So that's what they're pushing. If just 4,270 people had changed their votes, that bill, and how about this? There's another bill going to be heard Tuesday, which is going to be a constitutional referral to us, the people, if it gets passed, that we vote to change Oregon's constitution. To do what? To allow a statewide property tax. State doesn't have a property tax on us now. It's our local government. It's our counties, our cities, right? School districts, fire district. This would allow a statewide property tax. Outside of the limits, we have constitutional limits on how much government can raise our property taxes. Measure 5 and Measure 50. This would be outside of that. That bill's going to be heard on Tuesday. Now, if the people rise up and say no to these bills, the Democrats who are in power, who want to remain in power, are thinking about the upcoming election in November of 24 of this year, right? So they're going to make a political calculation in their brain. Well, maybe we shouldn't do that, because they want to get reelected, because they want to keep marching forward little by little, death by 1,000 cuts, we call it, with their Marxist, leftist, out of the pit of hell agenda. Okay. So what conservatives, Republicans need to do in the legislative process and at the local level is meet people where they are, listen to their concerns, but stand for their values and principles, and talk about how this impacts people's lives. Because I will tell you that people no longer vote with their brains.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that way.
They vote with their hearts. So these important issues, nothing is more emotional than your parental rights. Okay? It's deeply emotional. We did not learn that the Democrat Marxists had put forward a bill that allowed 10-year-old girls to have abortions without parental knowledge or consent. That's what they passed in House Bill 2002. It's one of the reasons that Republicans walked out in the Senate for 6 weeks, sacrificed their political careers to stop that bill. And then 3 Republicans got offered enough money for their districts, and I hold them in great disdain. Okay, those 3 Republicans in the Senate, and they came back, provided a quorum so Democrats could move that bill. They slightly modified the bill, but parents still lose their parental rights. That's a deeply emotional thing. And if people will rise up and speak from a powerful, emotional, personal viewpoint to those Marxist Democrat legislators, they get scared. But the other side of that is that powerful message then has to be articulated by the Republicans, those who believe in individual liberty, in God-given rights and God-given parental rights, to articulate those candidates when they're out there this fall. And if they do that effectively, they'll win the hearts and then the minds of the voters. And those voters will change from voting for the Marxist to voting for somebody who's going to protect their parental rights. And that'll change the entire, how everything works in Salem. And that's got to be what happens. And we just have to pray that there's wisdom on the part of those candidates and those legislators to do the right thing, that the Democrats will say, no, it's a bridge too far, we're not going to do this. And that the Republicans will say, okay, but since you tried, we're going to use it, and we're going to win hearts and minds, and we're going to stop you. Okay, that's what needs to happen. The most important thing is people of faith need to pray for our leaders. We're instructed to do that in the Word of God. Pray for our leaders. The hardest thing in the world, Marcus, was for me to pray for Kate Brown. Because I served with her.
You did?
Oh, yeah. I know her very well. I came in the House of Representatives. She was there.
So how many years has she been in?
She was from 2005 until she retired just recently, right, at the beginning of this last year.
Really? Interesting.
So she'd been in government a long time. She's a woman with a very black heart. Very black. And she's evil, okay? And she needs a lot of prayer for her soul, number one. But the current governor that we have is really not a whole lot different. The leadership of the House and the Senate have sold their souls to the pro-abortion crowd, to the Marxist crowd. And they do what they want because they feed them millions of dollars to, convince people that they're the best thing since sliced bread and you should keep putting us in power, right? And those people don't realize that these people are stripping their individual liberty and their rights and their freedoms from them, because the day's coming where your pastor and my pastor is not going to be able to stand in the pulpit and preach the Word of God because it's against what the state, the government says they can say.
Well, we saw a little bit of that during COVID.
Yes, we did. We saw a lot of that.
A start of it anyways.
The church I was at last night, River Church, was one of 5 churches out of 230 churches in Salem 5 churches that refused to stop meeting when Kate Brown
Really?
said, my own church over here stopped meeting.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They kept meeting. And there were black vans in their parking lot that were filming them and, coming and going, and they didn't care. They were going to obey God rather than man. The same thing is happening today. I'm part of a federal lawsuit that was filed a month and a half ago against Tina Kotek, the governor's, what we call the Ministry of Truth. This is the Secretary of State of Oregon has awarded a contract to an English company that uses artificial intelligence to go out there and to monitor your Schrock Show podcast. What I'm saying on my radio show. What you and I are writing on Instagram or Facebook or X or whatever. To monitor it. And if the artificial intelligence says, well, that goes against the official government narrative on elections. This is specific to elections. If that goes against it, then they tell the Secretary of State, and then the Secretary of State engages with this private company in suppressing our free speech. In going to YouTube or Rumble or X or Facebook and saying, that's fake news. It's misinformation, and they call it misinformation, malinformation, or disinformation. That's written into this contract, okay? Government has no right to suppress our free speech, even through a third party, and this is how they think they're getting around the First Amendment, okay? But it's even worse than that, because if they think that what you said or what somebody heard me say on this podcast about elections is threatening, then the Secretary of State reports us to the FBI or the state police and or both, okay? And we could face prosecution and a $10,000 fine because we disagreed with what the Secretary of State said about an election. Now, if that isn't a loss of our First Amendment right, our God-given right to free speech, I don't know what is. That's why we've sued them in federal court. We're going to start deposing the people involved in it next week. We've asked a judge, a federal judge, to stop this with a preliminary injunction right now so that it can't go forward based on the First Amendment. So we'll see what happens. This has actually happened in a couple of other states, and there are federal lawsuits going on in both California and Washington over the same thing.
So do you get any flack over your talk show?
Oh yeah,
all the time.
But the good thing is it ramped up during COVID because everybody believed the lie that COVID was this thing that was going to kill everybody, right? The original COVID variant, yes, was deadly for some people. There's no question about it. But did we need to shut down a whole economy and a world?
Well, I heard Sweden stayed open.
They did.
The whole time.
And they have less problems than we have, less death from COVID attributed, by the way. That's a fact, okay? So that's when it really reached a height. So the things I was saying, in fact, we held worship services on the steps of the Capitol. We brought in churches from all over Oregon. The Romanian, the Ukrainian churches came down from Portland because they had lived under tyranny. They'd lived under the boot of the Soviet Union, right? And they saw what was happening, and they didn't like it. And they came down to join us, and we had people we had all kinds of churches there. But we were attacked by other churches who said we were acting in rebellion because we weren't submitting ourselves to the authority of the government. Well, again, we submit ourselves to the authority of God Almighty first. And if I have to make a choice, I submit myself to the authority of God. And if that costs me my life and my freedom, then so be it. So that's where we really started getting the pushback. And, we got pushback. I had listeners that would call or would email me saying, what you're saying about not wearing a mask is going to get people killed. Well, as a farmer, I wear an N95 mask when I'm blowing off farm equipment so I don't suck a lot of dirt into my lungs, right? Damage my lungs. The N95 mask is far better than these little strips of paper that they ask us to put, right?
Oh, yeah, those little...
Because the N95 mask still does not stop the COVID molecule. It's much smaller than that from entering into your lungs, okay? You'd say that all day long. And people would disagree because Anthony Fauci said you had to wear a mask.
Yeah.
As much as I support Donald Trump, this vaccine business was completely wrong. And yeah, I know we did Operation Warp Speed, and yeah, but there's a reason why these vaccines are still being administered under the federal law known as the Emergency Use Authorization. Okay?
Yeah.
They are not vaccines that have been fully vetted and have received full FDA approval.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, they're not
They
FDA
haven't.
approved. Yeah.
I never took the vaccine. My 86-year-old mother never took it, who has lots of health problems.
Yeah.
I know lots of people who haven't. I know people who did who've died of COVID or died, went into the hospital, they put them on a ventilator, and that ventilator killed more people than anything else. And the stats and the doctors are coming out and talking about it today. So we got a lot of pushback from that. I have less pushback today because most people are realizing what that whole thing was about. It was really about controlling us and to seeing how much we, the people, would allow ourselves to be controlled. And it was sad that we did allow ourselves to be. And that's why we held those worship services.
On the steps. Huh?
Right. And we were told we couldn't have any public gatherings over like 100. Well, first it was 1,000 people. And then it went down to 150 people, and then it went up to 250 people. What scientific evidence are you offering us that 250 people is the magic number? Well, they couldn't. They couldn't tell us that. That's why it was all a fraud to begin with. So we stood on the Capitol steps. We had wonderful worship services, and we prayed for our governmental leaders. And I want to go back to that's why it was so hard for me to pray for government leaders, that I knew their hearts were in the wrong place. They were deceived by the enemy, Satan, and they were offering up ideas just like they're offering up ideas today. They're not bad people, they're just deceived in their spirits. We have to fight against that in the spirit realm by our prayers and standing, and then we have to stand against them as citizens because that's our right.
No, I read somewhere or heard somewhere that the government's not scared of false information. They're scared of truth.
That's right. They are scared of truth. Yeah. That's why they want to suppress the truth. Yeah. That's why they want to suppress our free speech and call it misinformation. Okay. And turns out a lot that we were saying is absolutely turned out to be true factually now. And you look at what happened during COVID. So what's the next thing that government's going to do to try to control us? What do you think it is?
I don't know. Do you guys know? What is it?
It could be a number of things. I think it's going to be a different type of terrorist attack that's going to happen in this country.
Think it'll be
It's not going to be 9/11.
No, not 9/11, but do you think it'll be through technology?
It will. It's going to be
that's kind of what
it's going to be our internet. It's going to be our cell phones. I mean, just think about it. This was part of my talk last night because actually I watched a video of a Butler County, Ohio sheriff who had just come back from the National Sheriff's meeting where the FBI director, who is an absolute Marxist, okay? I don't like this guy. He ought to be thrown in jail for what he's doing to our freedom. But he warned them all. Said, we have far more red flag warnings today than we had prior to 9/11. When you allow 8 million people to flood across the southern border, many of them that we've caught are on the terrorism watch list, many we've missed. Okay? Those people are planning something. So what would it be? Well, just think about how our society today, our business today, I couldn't do my radio show, you couldn't do this podcast if you didn't have an active internet. If they are able to destroy or really bring down the internet to a point that it can't function properly for a long time, it would bring our economy to a halt.
It would. We depend on
everything. What happens if you can't get enough food at Safeway or Winco?
Well, we saw that through the pandemic.
Yes.
Everything was wiped out. Toilet paper.
Exactly. So where would you get all of that stuff if...
Which you could function without toilet paper.
Right. So how do we communicate? Because I don't have a landline phone. I have a cell phone. That's all I have. Now, maybe I ought to get a landline phone just in case. Maybe I ought to get a shortwave radio. Maybe I ought to get an expensive satellite radio, which the government can't block, by the way.
Or get an old car that doesn't rely on computer chips.
I have a couple of those, as a matter of fact. Okay, I can still, to some degree, drive around, but so those are those. That's how I think we're going to be, because America is the only nation in the world's history that was founded on the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we know that because we have the actual speech of the Anglican priest, Robert Hunt, who got off of that boat, struggled up that hill with the pilgrims who'd come across. They made a wooden cross out of the mast of one of their ships. They went up that sand dune, and they put that cross in that sand dune, and he gave the speech, and he dedicated the founding of the United States of America to the furtherance of the gospel within America and out to the entire world. That was his prayer. On our Liberty Bell, many people don't know this, is inscribed that great scripture from Leviticus that says, proclaim liberty to all the land and the inhabitants thereof. That's our heritage as a nation. The enemy knows that. That's why they want to destroy everything that this nation is founded on, the nuclear family being the single most important one. Our ability to worship as we want, to say what we want, to choose how to live our lives. You don't have to serve God, but you have that choice. God gives us that choice. Didn't make us robots. You don't have to be a conservative Republican like I am. You can be a conservative Democrat. You can be a liberal. You can be a Marxist. Okay? You can be anything you choose to be. The enemy's trying to destroy the very foundations that God has created for mankind in every way. And in this country, those foundations were the basis of our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. So it gives us the ability, you and I, to sit here today and to engage in this conversation. The enemy wants to destroy that. And the way, if they can't destroy it by physically stopping us from speaking, they're going to try to destroy it by physically keeping us from communicating with each other.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't communicate with each other, you're isolated.
Right, you are, yeah. And that's why, I'm not a practicing Mennonite anymore, but I so appreciate the Mennonite faith around here, the Mennonite church, because they're a community of believers who believe the same way, and they do business together, they support each other. That's what we need more of, and not just in rural communities like ours, but in neighborhoods, in cities. Okay, communities, neighborhoods, neighbors need to start helping neighbors. Because if this does happen, and the FBI warned, he said, the FBI director said this in front of testimony in front of the U.S. Senate 2 weeks ago, said it is not a question of if another major terrorist attack or series of attacks will happen in America. It's just a matter of when will it happen. And this is why I advise, just like the 5 foolish virgins, the 5 wise virgins, have enough oil in your lamps.
Whatever that is.
Right. So have some extra food. And the Mennonite community around here, again, rural people, we tend to, raise a lot of our own food and beef and have those things. We can, and those are all good things. And everybody should take, and you should have enough toilet paper. You should have enough, and you should figure out, okay, if I can't communicate to my son or my daughter that lives in Portland or Salem from here by cell phone, how would I communicate with them? Well, okay, can you buy some shortwave radios and learn how to use them so at least you can have some communication, because they can't stop that.
No, they can't.
Because it's not internet based. It's not cell phone based.
No.
It's not I think they'll attack our electrical grid.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing.
You see that, I think it was California, they'd shut it off for a while.
Yeah. And that's what they want to do here by taking down our dams.
Yeah.
The Army Corps of Engineers held these series of meetings about what would happen if we no longer produced power from the Willamette Basin dams, the 2 on the South Sandiam, the 2 on the North Sandiam. They're already, we know the Biden administration wants to remove 4 Snake River dams on the Snake River, and now they're talking about they want to remove all of the Columbia River dams, okay? And as much as I think Portland needs a good flush, a good flood, like they used to have before those dams were built.
Probably.
I say that tongue in cheek.
That's the opposite of drain the swamp.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's this kind of insanity.
Yeah.
When I was first running for office in '97, there was a Republican meeting, and it was a debate meeting. Okay, and they actually brought up the idea of taking down the dams in 1998 when I was running for office.
Really?
And I thought they were crazy. Yeah. Guess where we are today? We're 2024, and they're gonna try to. Well, we're already removing the dams down in the Klamath Basin, right? Yeah. Okay. Only Congress has the authority to do this, and this is why elections matter. And the left knows that, which is why they try to steal elections. And there are Democrats, there are Democrat liberal judges on the East Coast ordering new elections in local races because ballot stuffing, fraud was proven.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they say that our elections are safe and secure, it's an absolute lie. Yeah. There's a federal lawsuit right now that's happening in Georgia. It's curling, I believe, against Raffensperger. Raffensperger is the much maligned and deservedly so Secretary of State there. And this is a liberal guy suing Raffensperger. Well, in front of the federal judge just 2 weeks ago, the recognized computer expert, Dr. Haldeman from the University of Michigan, took a Dominion vote tabulation machine. There's stories about this on the internet. And literally took a ballpoint pen, inserted it, restarted the computer in safe mode, went in safe mode, changed the results of the election, and then edited the log files so no one would ever see that he was here. And then he restarted it, and the judge saw all of this. Yeah. The entire courtroom saw all of this. Yeah. Okay? So don't tell me that those voting machines are safe.
So he did this in front of people? Just to prove that he could do it.
And this is all in public record in federal court.
Yeah.
Now, the judge has not ruled yet, but the whole point of that was that they were ruling that these vote tabulation machines can be hacked. We had a lawsuit here in Oregon, in Washington County on this very thing. The Attorney General of Oregon sent a brief opposing our lawsuit, because we wanted the data log files to see everything that was happening in the background, right? And the Oregon Attorney General said in her brief, and again, this made national news, said in her brief that these vote tabulation machines can be hacked. Well, wait a second. They're not supposed to be connected to the internet in any way, either hardline or air-gapped, but they all have wireless modems in them.
Which makes them easy to hack.
Yeah. There is, in fact, a federal program down to the county level, right here in Lynn County, that those wireless modems that they're not supposed to have, that we were told they don't have, the federal program literally can access all of our vote machines in every county in the United States of America. The federal government can. And they can look at the results and they can adjust the results. This is all federal testimony in front of federal committees.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the only way that we ensure that we have real, true, safe elections that are absolute is no machines, hand balloting, hand counting, and you show that you are who you say you are, voter ID.
Yeah,
Right? France had their presidential election. They do not use machines. They did it all by hand balloting, and by 10 o'clock that night, 2 hours after their polls closed, they knew they had just reelected Emmanuel Macron as their president.
Sounds like a Mennonite ordination.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. So if the entire country of France can do it in one night, we can probably do it in America. But that's not the scheme. The scheme is to allow forever voting and to allow more votes to show up in a precinct than there are people who are registered to vote.
Yeah, yeah.
It happens in Oregon. It happens in all the country. So wait a second. So how do you get more votes in a precinct than people who are registered to vote there?
Yeah, wasn't there some even dead people voting too?
Lots of dead people voting.
Yeah.
In fact, lots of people who are phantom voters that have been proven to be on the voter rolls in counties all across America.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
That's
yeah.
right. And this is what you do with fake voter rolls or voter rolls that are not cleaned regularly of dead people or people that move. In many states,
move around,
if you move out of that state, you are not eligible to vote in that state.
Right.
Now, Oregon's different, of course.
Of course. Huh?
Oregon says that, Marcus, if you move to Ohio, but you think you still consider yourself to be an Oregon resident, even though you're registered to vote in Ohio, you can still vote in Oregon. Oregon will still send you a ballot because you think of yourself as an Oregonian and you're thinking you're going to come back here someday. So you can still register. You can vote in Oregon elections.
Really?
Yeah, that's what Oregon says. It's utter insanity.
So now, not every state's different, right? I mean, some states you can't do that.
Some states you absolutely cannot do that.
Yeah.
And if they're smart, they won't do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
So you're out of the whole. I mean, so like you said, you go around, do the advising or coaching.
I'm still very much involved in politics. I'm not serving anymore.
You're just not serving. Yeah.
I started the largest public charter school in the state of Oregon, Oregon Charter Academy, when I was in, or it was Oregon Connections Academy. It's now Oregon Charters Academy. That was when I was in legislature in 05. I was chairman of the board for 16 years. We went to, and during COVID, we had 5,000 students.
Okay.
Public charter school. I served on the fire district at Sublimity for 17 years when I lived up there. And so my years of running for office and public service are over because God's called me to something different now, and that's to help other people who God is calling to be involved politically. And that doesn't mean you have to run for office. It means maybe you just want to, maybe you decide you want to support your son running for office. Maybe God calls your son to go run for the school board. Well, God calls you to say, okay, I agree with it. We prayed about it. We think it's right. So now I'm going to help you do that. So my goal and my role is to help you help them, support them. Or maybe I directly train candidates how to run for office, again, at any level. And that's part of what some of what my advice was and my training was last night.
All right, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all the questions I had for you. But
I can go on forever, can't I?
We can make this a 3-hour one. So.
Yeah, well, as long as you want to talk, I'm good to go. At some point we probably need to break for lunch, but aside from that.
Yeah, somebody want to bring lunch in?
Yeah, there you go. No, I really believe that we as people of faith, God calls us, whether we believe we should be in many of our contemporaries in the Mennonite Church don't believe you should run for office. Many of them don't vote. Okay, that's fine. If that's their theology and they're at peace with that, God bless them. I'm not going to say that that's wrong. We all have to walk in our faith before the Lord, But to those people who are really feeling that calling to do that, the most important thing is pray about it. Make sure it's in God's plan, His will for your life. Make sure your family understands the cost.
It's a pretty big sacrifice.
It's a big sacrifice. That's right. Because now you're not going to be able. You're going to miss some ball games of your kids, some soccer.
Maybe birthdays, huh?
You're going to miss a birthday or two.
Yeah.
You're going to miss time with your spouse. And so that's why we call it being a legislative widow.
Okay.
And that's what my wife was.
Yeah.
Because I took my service so seriously that I was always gone. And after a while, it really wounded her. And it was a bad thing. It was a negative thing in our marriage. So there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
And so, maybe your friends and your neighbors aren't going to be your friends and neighbors anymore because you have to take a tough stand on something that is right. You know it in your heart. You know it by your values and your principles that you have to take this stand. And if you feel that you're called to do that, pray about it, get God's approval, his go-ahead, understand the costs, engage intelligently and smartly about how you campaign effectively, how you win hearts and minds, and ask again the Lord to show that to you. And then when you get in public office, you need to continue to have people who will pray for you so that you stand firm, because the process of politics pulls you and draws you away from your values and principles. As human beings, when we work with in our marriages, we know we have to compromise, right?
Yep.
Okay. The same is true in politics at any level. Okay. But the place you cannot go is when you compromise your values and your principles. Okay. Then you've sold your soul, and that's wrong. And then bad things are going to happen when you do that. So you have to have that support system to stand behind you, to stand firm for what you believe and where God's called you to be. Maybe it's not involved in politics at all, okay? But God still calls you to pray for those that have charge over you, is the way the word describes it, okay? So you need to, at the very minimum, people need to pray for their leaders, even the leaders they can't stand. And it's hard. Let me tell you, it's hard. But you got to do it, because that's what God calls us to do.
One other question real quick. I forgot to ask you, how are the farmers being affected by all this, like in Oregon? Or
well, not good.
Are they targeting them on the political level?
And it's going to get even worse. So there, again, it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
So now we have farm overtime laws, right? We have age laws that you under a certain age you can't go out and pick strawberries. You know, you and your brother were moving pipe for me.
13 years old.
Right, at 13 years of age.
12 and 13.
Today you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so the do-gooding Marxist leftists who pass all these rules, and not only laws, but rules, the administrative rules, people need to understand this. The legislature passes the laws, governor signs them, they become law. Then whatever agency, in relation to what farmers, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Labor and Industries, they would then come up with rules to how do you make that law, that new law work. So they come up with the rules. And sometimes those rules don't reflect what's even written in the law. I've had that happen to me, by the way. And so that's all part of the process. So it does impact us in the rural areas. They're constantly trying to take away our chemicals, our ability to use fertilizers. The big revolts we've seen in Europe right now with all the farmers, thousands and thousands of farmers filling up the state capitals. Why? Because they want to cut their fertilizer use to half.
Wow.
Well, you know, I know fertilizer prices are high, and when they were really high, I reduced my fertilizer usage by about 20% or so. And I still got good yields, so okay, I could do that. But half?
Half, you probably not.
No. Certain chemicals that we need to use to suppress weeds or to protect our crops from, even food crops, from insects and things. You know, they want to take those from us. So that's why the involvement in the political process is so important, because if nature abhors a vacuum, so if there's a vacuum somewhere, something rushes in to fill it. So if there's a vacuum of God-fearing, Bible-believing people who believe in liberty and that that's our foundation as a nation, if we don't step in and stand up for those things, even with the simple thing of praying, then we're going to lose it all. Because the enemy's out there wanting to take it from us. I want to take our families, want to take our freedom, want to take our ability to do what we're doing here today from us. So we have to stand together.
All right, well, I think that's all. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Marcus. Anytime you want to put up with a windbag like me, it's okay.
Maybe we'll have you on again sometime.
Sure.
Maybe after the election, huh?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Talk about
we'll
that.
see if 4,270 votes change.
That's got to be a fraction, percentage-wise. That's got to be very small.
If you look at the number of precincts, precinct is just a little voting area, right? it's just a few votes per precinct.
Yeah, it's
So
gotta
maybe
be
that
really
means
small.
the candidate should have knocked on a few more doors and worked a little harder and went to a few more neighborhood watch meetings and had conversations with people, listened to people.
Yeah.
Because they want to be listened to and they want their concerns to be at least heard, okay, and understood. It's one thing for your constituents to come and say, I really want you to do this. You listen, you talk about it carefully, and then you in the end, you say, I can't do that, and here's why. But if you're respectful, they're not going to like it, but they know that you dealt with them honestly. And that's really true at like the city council level, and because that's where government is best when it's closest to the people, right? At the city council level and in the county commission and so forth. People want to know that you care about what they think. That's what's important. Even if you give them a fair hearing and you're honest with them, they may not vote for you, but they're going to tell people, you know what? That guy or that gal was honest with us. They dealt honorably with us. And, I got to give them that.
Yeah. So,
And that goes a long way in America these days.
all
So
right,
we'll see. We'll see if
we'll
all of that really works out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd love to come back after the
yeah.
election. It'll be fun.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Marcus.